Pro wrestling, if you really want to get into it and you really want to talk about it, number one, you have to recognize something very important, which is that it's the last great commercial bastion of performance art. It is true performance art. People suffer for their craft. These guys get hurt. If you're listening to this and you've never seen pro wrestling and you're thinking, pro wrestling is fake, you need to watch a little bit of pro wrestling there. You can't fake falling 8 feet onto your back. That mat is not a crash pad. It hurts. These guys suffer every night, and they're actors, ultimately. They use what is essentially dance, the art form of pro wrestling.
First of all, people say wrestling is fake, but that's idiocy because these guys get hurt all the time and put their bodies on the line for this. You don't see Chuck Norris actually getting his back broken in these fights. You don't see Jason Statham getting destroyed. A character in wrestling is made up of many different parts, not just like good or bad. Wrestling is your whole body. It's dance mixed with stunt work. I mean, he portrays, even as he's saying, he has to think while you're being hurt. You have to think about the best way to make getting hurt look great.
Wrestling is melodrama. Wrestling is mythology. Wrestling is action. Wrestling is comic books. The only thing wrestling isn't is wrestling.
What is going on, guys? This is Paul Bradley with the Indie Profiles, where, first episode, pretty exciting. Like I said, my name is Paul Bradley. Each episode of the Indie Profiles podcast, I take an independent wrestler, talk to them over the phone about their career and life. And this week, we got the man himself, Killer Kevin Condrin from Chikara. What's up, Kevin?
Hey, Paul. Thanks for having me.
No problem, man. So...
I'm coming to you live from Venice Beach, so it's going to be a little noisy in the background, but it'll make for an entertaining podcast, I'm sure.
I think so. What are you doing out in California?
Well, I moved out here about almost 2 years ago, and I guess I'm doing what everybody else does when they come to California. I'm looking for the sun, I'm trying to be outside and trying to I grew up and was born and raised in Philadelphia, and for about 26 years I, dealt with 4 seasons. I'm kind of just ready to have it be summer year-round. So that's pretty much what I've been doing out here.
Sounds like a plan. Have you taken on any water sports yet?
Oh, no water sports, man. I've been seeing a lot of poisonous water snakes turning up on the beach though out here. And that's like my biggest fear. So I've been staying out of the water, but I'm getting plenty of sun, tanning.
Terrifies me a bit.
You telling me. So
yeah, you were born in Philadelphia, correct?
That's right.
And you've only been a independent wrestler since 2014.
That's right. That's when I made my debut as Kid Cyclone for Wrestling is Fun, and that was after almost 2 years of training with Chikara.
That's crazy. Did you come up with the Kid Cyclone character yourself, or was that put on you by some of your trainers?
Yeah, that was given to me by my trainers, and that was pitched to be a part of what eventually would become something different. And then we sort of found out that we had a lot of newcomers and a lot of new masked gimmicks that really didn't have an identity. And Kid Cyclone, the character, sort of emerged as being a leader amongst the new class, so to speak. Argus came from that class, who was another notable graduate. Creator Wrestler 2, Equinox 3. So there were a couple that came out of that general class that I was part of. And it seemed like Kid Cyclone was kind of forming into something, and then things took a turn. Kid Cyclone didn't last very long.
Yeah, it didn't. For the fans listening who don't know Chikara very well, the thing that really drew me to Chikara was the Deucalion storyline, which a group known as the Flood, Jimmy Jacobs, Eddie Kingston, Volgar, and their big heavy hitter, 6'4" masked wrestler known as Deucalion, kind of were running roughshod in Chikara. Kid Cyclone character, got a couple guys together to take him on, and yeah, it didn't end well with Kid Cyclone being the only survivor, which, you don't see wrestlers being killed off in storyline, and I don't think I've seen it in any other promotion.
No, it was definitely something that was unique to Chikara, and frankly, as shocking as it was for the fans, it was just as shocking for us as members of the roster. You'd show up and there'd be a wrestler that was with us one day, and then they weren't with us ever again. They were gone. They were written off the show. So, yes, they were killed in the storyline sense and in the universe that Chikara exists within. But same time, they were also removed from the locker room. I mean, we didn't see them anymore. So it was very real. Again, as much as Deucalion, it was a great, it was a really well written kind of plot. It was also very real for us.
Yeah, I always assumed that when Equinox and Create a Wrestler were in storyline killed off, I always assumed that they took on different masks and rejoined the roster. I had no idea that they were completely gone.
Oh yeah, no, they were gone. To be honest with you, I haven't even seen them since the 20 whatever that last date was that they were both with us.
That's insane.
Yeah. I was looking forward to working together, and haven't seen where the future brought the GHM with Greenhorn Militia, which is what we called the group at the time. But things change, and that's the nature of the beast, I think.
Yeah, it's just really fascinating when you look at Chikara, because I had never really heard of Chikara. I was brought in by WWE, but then like in related searches, you see like Chikara wrestler killed in ring, and you go, what is this? And then you kind of go down the rabbit hole that is Chikara, and you go, wow, this is unlike anything I've ever seen before.
Yeah, that's a great way to describe Chikara. It's a fully immersive. I mean, same way that you have the Marvel Cinematic Universe, Chikara was one of, I think, the first wrestling companies to really create a distinctive universe, to give it rules, and then to allow characters to exist therein. WWE has since adopted, the WWE universe, and they use that, but in a lot of ways they break their own rules, and that's something that Chikara, for the most part, never does.
Yeah, when I was listening to The Art of Wrestling with Colt Cabana and Mike Quackenbush said a very interesting thing, and he said that when you look back at, let's say, the character of Kane, and you go through all his bullet points from his debut interfering in Undertaker's Hell in a Cell match to now, it just doesn't add up. Like the different points he's gone with, it just doesn't make sense. But when you look at someone like who's been in Chikara this whole time, like look at Icarus or Hollow Wicked, if you follow them from their first show to now, it just all matches with their character, which speaks volumes for the people who booked that show.
Yeah, you're not kidding. And I mean, you mentioned Hollow Wicked. He's somebody who's been one of my favorite wrestlers for a really long time. He didn't speak for how many years? And then, once the character took a turn that no one had ever seen before, once he started to turn into something different, that layer was added. And then, holy crap, now he's terrifying.
Yeah, Hollow Wicked's definitely a very talented guy. So yeah, getting back to the death of Kid Cyclone, really, after Kid Cyclone's friends were killed in front of him, your character really took a turn, took a very different turn in a very, real sense, taking the mask off and becoming Kevin Condrin. And I was always fascinated by that storyline when you started converting old members of the Flood. And can you take me a little bit into, the emotion behind that and how much input you had?
Yeah, it was brought to me. So King of Trios, I cut a lot of promos as Kid Cyclone, but it definitely wasn't the Kid Cyclone character that we originally created. It wasn't plucky, it wasn't upbeat, it wasn't 1960s Robin. It was angry, and it was something different. And that's when it was kind of pitched to me, hey, how do you feel about turning into something different? How do you feel about taking off your mask, and how do you feel about becoming like a Magneto type character? And that was huge for me. I was blown away by just that, that idea. And I thought, if I could turn Kevin Condron into sort of, and Troll was sort of the toad to Condron's Magneto, and if I could turn that character Kevin Condron into something that people believed in, but they didn't necessarily like or enjoy. I mean, you can sympathize with Magneto, but you don't really like him. He's kind of a jerk, And that's sort of what we wanted to go for. And in Chikara, things were always traditionally very, very primary colors was sort of a theme that we got attached to, because they were always very simple. You knew who the bad guys were, and you knew who the good guys were. But this was the first time, especially with the Flood, where it started to blend that reality that we created.
I notice you're using a lot of comic book references. It kind of reminds me of Quackenbush's whole comic books and wrestling go hand in hand.
Yeah, he's not kidding. I mean, everyone in the locker room, for the most part, is a comic book fan to some extent. We're all reading something. it's really Mike Quackenbush he taught me from day one. I had never really been a member of anybody else's. Like I'd never trained with anybody else. I never learned from anybody else. He was the first guy to start really teaching me, and I believed in his vision right away. I used to have this goal for myself that I want it to be this kind of super athletic and really cool wrestler, whatever that means. But what I ended up finding was that I really appreciated telling stories more than anything else, and that's what it's all about. That's what wrestling is. It's just storytelling, but using a different performance art medium. And like I said, Quack, like you mentioned, he taught us that shared universes and consistencies don't just have to be something that you see in comic books. A story that runs deep, or a story that has like long-term implications, or references in season 11 back to season 1, like that doesn't just have to happen in one medium. That can happen for wrestling. And honestly, I think you're going to start seeing more of that. I mean, you just look at Lucha Underground. Some of the stories that they're telling, you can see very similar stories being told at Chikara 10 years ago. And that's not to take away from what Lucha Underground does. I think what they're doing is amazing. But again, it's I think what Quackenbush has put out there, and the way that Quack has, I think he's done a lot to change the way people perceive wrestling, because he's created, he's the one who trained me, and without him and what he taught me, I wouldn't be spreading my type of storytelling and the way that I do it, and it just goes on from there. So it's kind of like a network effect, or a spiderweb effect, if you will.
He's definitely a Renaissance man.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
So it also says here, yeah, I know you were trained by Quackenbush. It also says here, this is cagematch.net. You'll have to correct me if I get these facts wrong. It says you were trained by Mike Quackenbush, Hallow Wicked, Green Ant, Fire Ant, Chuck Taylor, Ophidian, and Icarus.
Yeah. And Drew Gulak is another one I would add to that list. I spent a lot of time training one-on-one with him. But it's interesting because there used to be this like sort of way of thinking about training as you had one trainer. I didn't. I mean, I consider everyone that was my superior or my senior at Chikara to be someone who helped train me. Even my first year at Chikara, sharing the locker room with El Generico, I learned a lot just from watching him and listening to the way he interacted with people. And he was always kind of open and giving people advice. Colt Cabana, same thing. Like Chikara, the Young Bucks were in the locker room at that time, so I got to learn from them. But as far as actual in the ring training, Quack, Chuck Taylor, they've kind of taught me just about everything I know. And Hollow Wicked, I spent a lot of time training with Hollow Wicked.
And just looking at that list, I'm a bit envious. Those are just some great names.
It's a who's who of indie wrestling.
It really is.
And there was a time when I started that it was for me, it was between Chikara or Ring of Honor. And Ring of Honor the school was kind of closed when I had first started looking into it. Like they weren't running new classes quite yet.
Who was the trainer there?
I believe Delirious was the trainer at the time.
Oh, that's right.
And they, what I learned though, the cool thing about Chikara was, especially in the early going, we used to share classes a lot with Ring of Honor. So, I got to train with Cheeseburger and Jay Diesel and Stokely, and a lot of guys that are, starting to make their way in Ring of Honor now too. So it's nice to see that. And same with, I guess the School of Rock in Indiana, which Heidi Lovelace came out of, and Trip Cassidy and Reed Bentley. Like there were a couple others that are in the Midwest now starting to make a name for themselves. So it's kind of like we all came up at the same time and we had a chance to train with each other in the early going.
Yeah, the new renaissance of real trainees. Yeah, I would definitely agree with you when you say people like Heidi Lovelace and guys like Jay Diesel and Donovan Dijak. That's really fascinating to me.
Dijak was another one. He was a trainee when we were, and we kind of he's blown up huge, and it's great to see because there's no success. There's an infinite amount of success for us out there. There's no there used to be this mentality of let's all just scratch and claw and knock each other down to get to the top, but it doesn't need to be like that. Everybody can be a success.
That's really weird to me how Ring of Honor and Chikara train so close to each other when they couldn't be any more different, really, because Ring of Honor is such a very match-based promotion.
And if you recall, that was during a time too when we were having crossover shows.
That's right.
They called them, but I remember there was one in Chicago Ridge that that was the time where I saw Sarah Del Rey and El Generico have probably one of the best matches I've ever seen live.
I would give my left ear to see that match live.
Yeah, if you look it up, it was in April of 2012 in Chicago Ridge, Illinois. So it was a synergy show, I think they called it, synergy. But that was just a time when we were, it was really great for me as someone who was brand new to the industry to kind of get that, to get that knowledge of, this is what Ring of Honor's training center looks like. This is how they behave here. You get like a well-rounded view of everything. So.
Yeah, going back to your beginnings, were you always a wrestling fan, or it was more like you got into it later in your... Like, I didn't get into wrestling until I was 15.
I was always a fan, yes. But I admittedly had never been to an indie wrestling show or seen one until the first one that I was a trainee at.
Really?
Yeah, so I had no idea about this more detailed, more intricate, more intimate landscape that existed in the professional wrestling canvas.
Did you know it was scripted up to that point, or did you go in thinking it was real?
I definitely had that much figured out, but I was of the belief that I wanted to end up in Orlando as fast as I possibly could. And then Quack kind of got me under his wing, and I saw this entirely different way of presenting wrestling, and that just changed everything for me, and I couldn't be happier doing it the way I'm doing it now.
Was there a certain wrestler that really drew you into wrestling? For me, it was more, I knew what wrestling was, but as soon as I saw the character Bray Wyatt, I went, okay, I need to check this out. Was there a guy that really drew you in and was like, what is this?
When I started training, it was Ziggler for sure.
Really?
Yeah. When I started training, I was every week I would watch his matches, and then I would go try to copy him at training. And but what I learned is that it really hurts to be Dolph Ziggler.
Yeah, he's really good at selling.
He's phenomenal, and he was a guy I used as kind of like a template to try and be like. But just in general, when I was a kid, I think that The Rock was like the guy that I went to the mall to wait in line for. He was the one that, and Mankind too, and Stone Cold. I mean, the Attitude Era legends were pretty much the guys that drew me in, really. But I can even remember being 3 years old and having, the Ultimate Warrior, all the pink and green, lime green stuff, and my brother had all the Hulk Hogan red and yellow stuff, and that was in the early '90s. So wrestling has always kind of been around for me.
That's crazy. So, I guess my next question would be, is Dolph Ziggler your favorite professional wrestler, or is there one that you always keep close to your heart?
Right now, it changes, honestly. It changes match to match. It changes week to week. Right now, my favorite performer to watch is Sasha Banks.
Oh, I would definitely agree with that.
Yeah.
She's incredible.
Because I used to see, I've been watching her matches since she was in Beyond Wrestling. Back when I started, people were talking about her just in locker rooms, you know what I mean? And then to see her and how far she's come, it's just really been incredible.
And her being trained by Brian Fury
after Mania, I've been kind of moving towards being a Charlotte fan. That moonsault, might have won me over.
That'll be a highlight for years to come.
It really will.
But no, I've been talking with Brian Fury, who trained Sasha Banks, to also be on this show. So that'll be really interesting.
Yeah, Brian Fury's awesome. He's
a very down-to-earth dude.
I love seeing when he pops up. He's been having some kick-ass matches lately, too.
Him and Zack Sabre Jr. at Beyond Wrestling kind of made me rethink what professional wrestling was. I was like, oh my God.
But I feel like every name we're mentioning is my favorite wrestler at this point. You know what I mean? Like, everybody I see, like, even Marty Scurll, I got to...
Oh, I could go on for hours. He's my number 2 all-time favorite wrestler.
I said to him recently that, I was like, why aren't you living in Hollywood? Fighter. Like, those guys are just so talented now. They're light years ahead of what's being done, and in the mainstream. Yeah. I think that what they're going to be doing is going to be mainstream very soon.
Marty Scurll versus William Ospreay at, I think, Revolution Pro High Stakes is the only match I've ever stood up and had to bow, even though I was alone. I was like, nope, got to get up. This is incredible. So yeah. Also.
Well, I was going to say, I think it's something special when, two people putting on a performance or putting on a show get you to actually feel like I have to stand up to properly show my appreciation for what I just saw.
Exactly. And
that's how
yeah.
I felt that watching the NXT Takeover Brooklyn, Bailey versus Sasha. I hadn't, and I tell this story to people because as a fan, and this is something that Quack has kind of said before, and I'm sure you may have heard it, but once you get this, once you're on the other side, even if it's for 3 months worth of training, you start to see the nuts and bolts that make up the show, and it can be hard to unsee those, because you're just more concerned about, oh, how did this come off? Oh, she's really selling great. He's really doing this well, rather than just emotionally investing in the story. Like, you care about who's going to win, but you're not sure who's going to win.
Right.
And I feel like with Sasha and Bailey, for example, that was one definitive moment where I can say I completely forgot I was involved in this crazy thing. I completely forgot I was watching something that could be considered, and I just felt completely emotionally invested in it. I stood up, I was yelling at the TV, like I was, and especially when Bailey hit that kind of like a intentional botched belly to belly off the top. It just crashed right on her head.
Oh my God, I remember that. That was terrifying.
Wailing, like I was screaming. I was, and yeah, I kind of felt the same way watching Shane McMahon at WrestleMania this year. Like, that was another thing. I was just screaming at the TV. But I still have those moments, and they're really, it's really amazing to kind of be able to feel that still.
It's interesting, even when people talk about the women's revolution in wrestling, and it was used as a marketing scheme in the beginning, but it's really starting to ring true because, in WWE you have guys like Becky Lynch and Bayley and Sasha, but when you look at the indies, I've never seen this much talent, from Taylor Hendricks to Candice LeRae to Jessica Havoc to Heidi Lovelace. It's just insane.
Yeah, it gives me goosebumps. Like, you just saying that, I get goosebumps about it because and it's funny because before I was a wrestler, I thought, how can a man lose to a woman? I can't suspend my disbelief for that. I questioned it. And then I watched Sarah versus El Generico, and I swear to God, I've never looked at women's wrestling the same. I've just looked at it as wrestling. And that's what the world is now getting to see. When you watch Sasha and Bayley and Becky and Charlotte, when you watch them on WWE, you don't see women's wrestling. You just see wrestling now. And it's the same thing. They stop calling the wrestlers. They're stars. They're superstars. And on the indies, I've gotten the chance to see, especially to see Kimberly and Heidi Lovelace up close. They had one of the best matches I've ever seen in North Carolina a few weeks ago. If you haven't gotten to see that, it's on Chikara Topia. I believe it was in March in North Carolina, and it was for the Grand Championship. It's the first time two women ever competed for what was previously a title only held by males, and it was better than any match I've ever seen live, aside from Generico and Del Rey.
So would you say that's your favorite match you've ever seen?
Up close and personal, yeah, definitely. Well, I didn't see Kim versus Heidi live, but Generico versus Sarah live was definitely the one that that changed things for me. And I actually, if you go back on the tape, I think I'm the timekeeper in that match. So, I was right next to it, and I got to feel every chop I heard every chop that Sarah threw, and I could see how hard she was going, and that for her, this wasn't intergender wrestling, this wasn't women's wrestling, or this wasn't a woman reaching a new peak. This was a woman beating the hell out of a man, and this was, it was wrestling, period. So I just, I'm sorry to get on my soapbox a little bit, but I'm just.
Oh, you're fine.
I've kind of told people lately that I'm more interested by women's wrestling. Gavin Loudspeaker and I have this conversation often. We talk about how it's just, at this point, it's more interesting to watch them because you see them getting better every single match. The fans are completely emotionally invested in them, and it's just really special to watch. It's a special time to be a fan, and it's a special time to be a part of it.
I think it's interesting also when you talk with people and you bring up, like, someone would say what their favorite match was, and even with you, I can't see what you look like right now, but whenever you mention Sarah Del Rey and Generico, you could just feel the excitement in your voice. It's the same way, like, when someone would ask me about Shinsuke Nakamura versus Kevin Steen at Ring of Honor, I would just be like, oh my God,
Sure.
You could just feel the radiation about how much they invested and how all the little details they've dissected.
Yep. It's it's kind of like too that we're experiencing a wrestling renaissance right now, and some would tell you that the market is oversaturated and that there's too much wrestling, but in my opinion, all it's doing is making people raise their game. And I think that competition breeds innovation, competition breeds creativity. And yes, WWE doesn't have any direct competition, but NXT has competition. NXT and they're at the level that's right under WWE. There is a ton of competition right now.
Yeah, when you look at when Lucha was first starting, I kind of looked at it like, oh, it's just another global force. This isn't going to be anything. But now it's like they're direct competition with NXT. And, WWE's like hunting their guys like Cuerno and Ricochet and Helico. And they're viewing him. It just almost feels like, in a very like watered down sense, it feels kind of like the WCW wars where they were like, we got to get these good guys out of that company.
Yeah, and that to me that's good because you know what? If in my opinion, Ricochet should have been making millions of dollars years ago. I mean, the guy's
definitely
one of the premier athletes on planet Earth.
He's one of the highest paid North American wrestlers now if he signs this new Lucha deal.
I mean, he deserves everything he gets and more, But if WWE takes him from Lucha Underground, that's a spot open on Lucha Underground for somebody that's kind of been clamoring for their next big step to take, So
that's what I've always said. I love the competition, and I like the idea if a guy gets so high that he gets poached. Because really, you look at Ring of Honor, Generico and Steen getting taken away, that just created room for Lethal and guys like Dalton Castle.
And so really, what they've done.
Yeah, they're incredible
now. Dalton Castle is a name that he's a household name at this point. For a wrestling fan, if you don't know Dalton Castle, then you better go learn about him. Like you're missing out.
For anyone listening, if you're not a wrestling fan, look up Dalton Castle.
Yeah, incredibly talented and incredibly fun to watch.
So also, getting back to your character, I kind of am very interested in for the people listening, you went from Kevin Condrin, who went around converting former members of the Flood, which was the group that killed your friends. You went around converting guys like Volgar. You converted him back to Lucas Calhoun. You went to Missile Assault Ant, which, in my opinion, was one of my favorite angles in Chikara history, was you and Missile Assault Ant. I thought that was fascinating. And
thank you.
I was very interested to see where the Snowflake character came from and this alter ego you had, and I kind of wanted to pick your brain on how that came about.
Well, so Kevin Condron was never meant to last very long. Kevin Condron was supposed to be a ground, sort of this is what this guy looks like in an everyday situation. Take, for example, the attire that Kevin Condron wore. That was something like that. He was wearing what he thought looked cool. You know what I mean? And he was supposed to kind of be off the mark. And that shone through in the way he acted. He was definitely insecure, but he also, in the next moment, could be full of himself and confident. And it was a guy who called himself a killer, but that was to compensate because in training he was called Snowflake by the dudes that he as Kid Cyclone before he was Kid Cyclone, when he just was a Chikara fan. That was at the orphanage in Easton, Pennsylvania, because a whole box of DVDs was dropped off at that orphanage by a mysterious luchador many years ago. Kevin Condron didn't have a family, so Chikara became this kind of surrogate family, and he would pretend he was a member of the roster when he was a kid growing up, and then he decided to finally go to get training, and here he is getting training, and Chikara enters this time of war, and off, and it essentially was kind of like in my head and in my notes, I had it as the kids aren't all right, because what would happen to a group of trainees for a company that previously was very kind of fun and sometimes and goofy and heartwarming, but never really dark? What would the trainees of this goofy, fun, spirited, primary color world, what would they look like if they came up at a time when there was death running rampant? I mean, I think there were 14 deaths in 2014. All things considered, maybe Deucalion took out like 11 or 12. I think it might have gotten up to 14.
I didn't think it was that many. I thought it was around 7 or 8.
It was a lot. That's what I remember.
A little bit of a confession. I was very, very emotionally hurt when Archibald Peck died.
Oh, I think the whole world was.
It hurt a bit.
Everybody was.
It hurt a bit.
Yeah, that was really sad. And you know, the snowflake idea again, it was that was just something that there was a personal problem for Kevin, you know, for the character that we explored, and someone, they called him Snowflake to get under his skin, and it did. And then slowly but surely, everyone kind of called him that in promos. Everybody used it to get under his skin, and even fans would chant it at him in in 2015. And when you go back and watch, you can see how it kind of is disturbing him and irking him, and slowly but surely he loses touch with reality because things aren't going well for his team. And it's a guy who expected success. He expected to be this leader. He called himself Killer, and he kind of snapped and lost it. And you know, that's when I say that the last time you ever saw Killer Condrin was Night 3 at King of Trios 2015.
Yeah, I gotta stop you there. I gotta praise you for that angle because that was incredible.
Thank you.
Just the fulfillment of like how this innocent man who watched his friends die before him ended up turning into that monster who killed another man's friends before him. I went, oh my, that's so incredible. Like,
and that was for me, that was very emotional because that was something that I had basically pitched a year prior, and I had been really kind of pushing for that closure. Like I pitched, you know, when I was brought the idea of, can you be our Magneto? I said, well, if I'm going to do that, we need to turn it into something grander, something different. And I said, I want to be something called Snowflake. And then I was met with kind of a smirk and a grin and what the hell are you talking about? And I
right.
said Ziggy Stardust on acid. And it was like, oh, okay, we get it.
That's incredible.
Yes. So that was always the phrase in my head for Snowflake, Ziggy Stardust on acid. And then it was like, well, how do we get here? What is Snowflake? Snowflake is a being of pure negativity. And it was, you know, the fans who said the words Snowflake to Kevin Condrin, they were slowly killing him inside. They were beating down his psyche. They were destroying him by calling him the one name. Because imagine this. Imagine you grow up without a mother, father, brother, sister, and you look at Icarus and Eddie Kingston as the people that would be your family, and then they start teasing you and calling you names. And with that in mind, that's what Snowflake did to Kevin Condrin. So maybe this character is, you know, unique, special, and beautiful, and maybe he is one of a kind, and maybe he is different, weird, and sad, and angry, and like that's what allowed so I guess that Kevin Condron arc that kind of closed at King of Trios last year, it ran right over into Snowflake, you know, and that was something different. And I feel like we may not have heard the last of Snowflake.
That's what I was going to ask you. I haven't been watching many of the newer episodes. I've been trying to catch up. I've been watching the what is it? The storyline, like the fall of Chikara.
Yes.
And so I haven't seen many of the recent shows. So if you could take me and the listeners through from what basically happened at the end of Night of Trios. Night 3 was you killed Orbit Adventure Ant in front of Arctic Rescue Ant and Missile Assault Man. And then, you know, Orbit Adventure's Ant dead body was carried to the back. And, you know, Lucas is like looking at you from the corner like, what did you just do? You know? And I just, where did you go from there?
Yeah, Lucas and Kevin Condron were very close. And Lucas was always very thankful to Condron for kind of letting him come out of his shell and helping him find himself. And that if you go and watch that moment back, you can see Lucas crying. And there's a photo of it too that I tweeted just the other day. You can see him weeping. Like it was very, very real. And it's just, for me, I believe in leaving a lot of intrigue on the table and leaving people to draw their own conclusions. So I'll let you know, if you're listening, I'll let you go ahead and find and seek out the story, seek out the ending. What seems to be the ending for now. But like I said, I can tell you that no door is ever fully closed. And, you know, it just as in comic books, no character is ever actually dead.
So as of now, the Snowflake persona has withdrawn itself, to say?
If you watch what Missile, because here's what you got to understand: Missile Assault Man, it was previously known as Missile Assault Ant. He followed orders. He didn't necessarily follow Condrin because he believed in him. He didn't follow Snowflake because he believed in him, but he was a soldier, and these were the guys that were commanding him. And if you watch any of his matches, you'll see that he suffers from PTSD. During his matches, he has blackouts. He had a finger gun fight with AJ Styles at King of Trios. That for him, he thought he was fighting a real gun, and he was freaking out, and it was.
He got sold, but he wasn't a soldier.
Well, and the thing that Snowflake, that's what Condron used to say to him.
I thought you'd get that reference.
Yeah, I got sold, but I'm not a soldier, and he was trying to remind Missile that you're not just a soldier, you're a man. But Snowflake had a different take on that, and he told Missile Assault Man that you sold your soul, and you're just a soldier. And Missile Assault Man, after having his partner killed, after being bossed around, after being blamed for losses, he took exception to Snowflake's attacks. And he, again, I'll let you go ahead and check it out on Chikaratopia because it's something.
Yeah,
it was scary, actually, very scary.
Scary. Oh, I'm looking forward to that. Which show would you recommend for me to check out then?
That would be the night show. I can't recall the name off the top of my head. It would be the night show on May 7th.
Okay.
2016.
Yeah, I've just been very.
So it's the same show as the Infinite Gauntlet, which was a new match that was introduced this year for Chikara.
Oh, well, that was a very recent show, so that probably won't be up on Chikaratopia for a while.
No, it's up. It's up.
Is it really?
I know that the rough cut is up for sure, but I'm not. I think the polished cut should be up too.
Oh, cool.
But yeah, I would urge any of the listeners to go check that out for sure. And if you have Roku, Chikaratopia works on Roku as well now.
That's good to hear.
I heard, and yeah, so it's definitely a rich time for wrestling in general. Being able to get just about any program on your Apple TV or your Roku, it's awesome. So I'm happy that that's up there, and I'm happy that that we have essentially every bit of work that I've done in professional wrestling up until this point has been recorded and shared.
Yeah, it's definitely a new era.
Yes, without a doubt.
I think we're winding down a bit, but I do want to ask you another question, and is that, you're very. We get the vibe that you're a very creative person. Coming up with Snowflake and the idea of Kevin Condrin. Are there any other characters that you've been holding on in your head for a while that you've been kicking around?
Oh, for sure. And I've got 3 up there right now that I'm going to be exercising pretty soon, if that makes sense. I got to get them out. They're in my head, and I have to make them real somewhere. I have one gimmick that I'm targeting specifically for the Las Vegas market. So it's and then another that I think would be more spread out, but will be. They're basically different. I grew up as a fan of Eminem, for example, and I always loved the way that he had 3 personas, sometimes 4, that he would sort of embody when he wanted to send different messages or tell different types of stories.
Right.
Kevin Condrin was a chance to tell a sad story. Snowflake was a chance for me to tell a hateful story, an angry story. And I think Kid Cyclone was supposed to be a chance for me to tell a hopeful story. But Kid Cyclone, unfortunately, didn't make it very far. So, I have a couple more. I have a story about greed. I have a story about perseverance through adversity. And it's funny because I used to pitch a lot of these ideas for myself, and I would get the advice back that was, okay, that's great. How about you try writing a character for somebody else? And I think that I still have a couple more in me that I want to get out before I can start focusing on that. So I'm... like I said, I got a lot up there, but don't worry, as long as you stay tuned, I'm sure you'll get to know them all sooner or later.
So do you think these characters will come out through Chikara, or do you think these could come out through other independent promotions?
Well, I'm not sure where they're going to show up. I think that a lot of things have to kind of sync up for it to be the right circumstances, so to speak.
Right.
I said recently that I think independent wrestling is going to take the form of artists hanging their work in a gallery, and I think the promotions are going to become the galleries, but they're going to essentially be booking different artists to sell their work there or to show their work there. So I think while Chikara, for example, is a fantastic ensemble piece, for me to even consider debuting a new character there, close down. And it's just it's something that I can't just kind of show up and be like, hey, this is what I want to do, because it's a whole living, breathing creation right now, and for me to do that would be sort of selfish. So
Right.
I'm it's definitely not like because trust me, I'd love to continue being at every Chikara show, but sometimes things it's just not in the cards. But with that being said, again, no door is ever really closed. I'm still on good terms with everyone there, and it's just a matter of I'm in Los Angeles now. So I will be looking to tell my stories and do these 2 or 3 characters that I kind of have working around, possibly out here. I mean, there's Championship Wrestling from Hollywood, which is a promotion I'm very familiar with. I know everybody that works there just from living here. Brian Kendrick has a new promotion called Wrestling Pro Wrestling, which is another one that I've been kind of eager to maybe try and get a tryout for, or see if I could show them what I've got. So there's and then of course there's Lucha Underground, there's Lucha Vavoom. I mean, there's a lot of places in Southern California that are sort of I guess.
Yeah, I would definitely say it's like
canvas out there.
It's the new Philadelphia, really.
That's an interesting way to put it. And one other thing is the young wrestlers out in California, they're hungry, and they're really getting after it. Danny Limelight, Dickie Meyer, Douglas James. If you haven't heard those names yet, look them up, because they're all within their first or second year, and they're all already having tremendous matches. Brody King is another one that comes to mind. These are guys that I mean, I'm seeing them at training. I'm seeing them. They're hustling every day, trying to find success. So the Southern California scene, I think, is just taken off.
Yeah, it's definitely exciting to see that grow. All right, well, I think we're going to wrap this up. I really appreciate you talking to me, Kevin.
Oh, sure thing, Paul. I appreciate you having me. It's an honor to be your first guest.
Oh, thank you.
And I'm sorry about the noisy climate here, but like I said, I'm literally standing on the beach right now, so
It adds depth. Sure. Don't you worry.
Okay, great.
All right, well, thanks again, man. I really appreciate it.
Sure, and hey, if anybody out there is listening would like to follow, just find me at Condron on Twitter. That's KONDRON.
Oh yeah, should have plugged you.
Just a quick plug. That's all.
That's what it's all about, man. It's all about you for this episode.
Awesome. Thank you again, Paul.
No problem, man. Thanks.
Take care.
And that was Kevin Condrin. Really cool guy. Really interesting mind about him in the world of professional wrestling. So yeah. That's my first episode of the Indie Profiles. My name is Paul Bradley. You can catch me at IvanFireJ on Twitter. It's my wrestling Twitter account. Or Paul versus the World on Instagram. I have a couple more episodes on the way. I'm filming a couple this week, and I'm just going to be posting them sporadically until I can get a set 1 a week or 2 a week system down. For anyone who's listening to this, thank you so much. And if you're a wrestling fan, hope this was insightful for a character who I'm really passionate about. And if you're not a wrestling fan, I'm excited that Kevin Condron was your first introduction to the world of professional wrestling. Professional wrestling. So, yeah, like I said, this is the Indie Profiles. My name is Paul Bradley. First episode, that was Kevin Condron, and I'll see you guys later.